What's going on, fellow human beings? Today we're going to be looking at making some really cool particle effects using my new software, Sprite Replicator. So the cool thing about this is that there are actually two ways to use it. One is the standalone web app, which I have open right now. I'm going to link that down in the description. But we can also use it as a Photopea plugin. So we're going to be taking a look at that later also. So right here with the web app open, it's asking me for document dimensions and a texture. So for dimensions, this is just like how big the image you're working on is. You might want to check that in your photo editor by going to image size or document details or whatever. So here I have it set to 1920 by 1080, so just 2K 16 by 9. For texture, I'm going to be choosing uh, fire texture. Uh, this is going to be what I used in my previous video on magic energy effects. So take a look at that if you haven't. And what I've done is I opened it in Photopea. I opened the fire image in Photopea. I desaturated it and scaled it down, and that's just the fire sprite.png that I've selected for my texture. So let's go ahead and get into the editor. Now this doesn't really look like energy effects to me. I don't know about you, but it doesn't look quite right. So first, I'm just going to focus on the base image. I'm going to set the number of duplicates down to 0. Down in the duplicate section, number of duplicates to 0. Now I'm going to open the base section, set the X position and Y position such that this base image is centered. So since my document was 1920 by 1080, this would be 960 by 540. And maybe I'll change the angle to 0, change the opacity to 1. No, maybe play with the scale it down a bit. Then I'll set the blend mode to screen. Right now it doesn't do anything, but as we add in more duplicates, it's going to make it so that only these brighter areas of the image are going to uh, show up. So like a black background of a duplicate isn't going to cover up the rest of the effect. So now if you see when I increase the number of duplicates, it'll do that, but uh, there's we have controls for X variance and Y variance. If you just play around with these, you'll see what it does. Like the lower my Y variance, the closer vertically all of the duplicates are. The higher, the farther away, the more spread out they're gonna be. The same with X variance. So let's just set them both to something like 200 for now. Maybe even lower, like 169. Looks pretty good. There's scale variance, that's what it sounds like, just makes every duplicate a random size. So if we increase this, there's going to be some more variation in size. If we decrease it, all of our duplicates are going to be the same size. I'll play around with that. Something like that looks good. Angle variance, it's basically the same as scale variance, but instead of changing how big the duplicates are, it changes how much they're rotated. So if we set this to 0 and then maybe spread out the particles some, that, you'll see that they're all facing straight upwards. All of these little beams of fire. But if we change the angle variance to 360, they're all rotated randomly. Now if I put the X variance back at 169, you'll see what that does. Change this back to 0. It's like vertical fire. And 360, it's more like the energy effect we want. Then opacity variance, it's again changes the randomness, but this time for opacity. Who would have guessed? So some of the particles are going to be very dim, they're going to be faded out, while some are going to be more opaque. Let's set that back. Then for seed, this changes the randomness, changes like which variation we get. So for example, I change it to like blank, we get this shape. Change it to M, a completely new shape. You can just play around with this, put in your favorite words, and see the different variations you get. Like maybe a banana. I don't know if I spelled that right or not, but you'll see that it's a new energy effect. Say energy. This is pretty cool looking thing. Alright, once you're done playing around with all the settings and whatnot, and you have an effect that you like, you can hit export and it'll download the image for you. Alright, now let's take a look at how we can use this in Photopea as the Photopea plugin. Here I'll make a new project, and then first thing you'll notice when you open the Sprite Replicator plugin is that it automatically sets the document dimensions for you. So in the standalone app, the defaults were 1920 by 1080, but if we open a document that's like 248 by 2048 by 2048, you'll notice that it'll read the dimensions from the document and update it as such. So this way you won't have to manually check how big your image is. Might save like 2 seconds, but it's also gonna save your your patience, I guess. Alright, so let's go back to our 1920 by 1080 document. And first I'm gonna be making a particle sprite or a texture. So I'll choose like a green color, something like this. Choose a cool font. What I'm gonna do is just type some numbers. Just can't have twos in it, of course. Just like that. Can make these bigger. Shoot. Alright. Now I'm gonna be making it fade out as we go up in brightness. So right now we have 10 characters. So they should gradually increase by 10% each time in brightness. So here I'll set the brightness to 10, and then 20, and so on. And this is the most fun part, of course. Alright, cool. I'm gonna convert this text layer to a smart object. Set its blend mode to screen. Then what I'm gonna do to add some extra effects to this is duplicate this smart object, apply some motion blur, vertical, and then increase the distance. And then to add a little more bloom, I'll duplicate this layer, drag these smart filters to the trash, and instead apply Gaussian blur, something like that. Alright, I'll take all of these layers 1001 layers and then convert it into one smart object. The reason I'm doing this is so that now I can open this smart object. I can actually export this document as its own image. This is what I'm going to be using for my texture for Sprite Replicator. Right, delete both of those layers. We're not going to need them anymore. Alright, now I'm opening Sprite Replicator and selecting the texture we just made. A very nice file name. And then, so X position, Y position, again, we're going to center them on the document. Maybe make them all smaller. Set the angle to 0 so that they're just vertical. Set the blend mode to screen. And so opacity seems fine. Now, first thing I'm going to do is set the angle variance to 0 because, of course, they all have to be vertical, not just the very first one. And then I might change the X variance and Y variance to 960 by 540 again. So that way the X's will range from 0 to 1920, plus or minus 960. And same for the Y's, they'll range from 0 to 1080 because that's 540 plus or minus 540. So cool. Maybe increase the scale variance so now we have some of these rain things that are really tiny and some that are a lot bigger. And I'll increase the number of duplicates, that there are a lot more of these drops. Now that I look at it, I think I should decrease the base scale. That's totally fine. You can go back and change anything you want. Alright, and then maybe I'll change the seed, something like the matrix. Doesn't look very good, so get rid of the. Right, I think that looks like a pretty cool effect. I'll add it to my document. And there we go, like a very nice raining code, just like you see in the Matrix, but in the Matrix, the directors actually used their uh, sushi cookbook to make the raining code effect. So they're all Japanese characters. But I've used numbers because I'm pretty boring. But it's still a pretty cool effect, and as you might have noticed, a Sprite Replicator is very versatile. There are a lot of really cool effects you can make with it, sorry. And yeah, so that's about it for this tutorial. I hope to see you next time.